Welcome to the next exciting talk here at FreightWaves. My name is Kevin Hill. I'm here with Denisa Scott, who is the president of NusPrime Endeavors. And we're going to talk about new space, we're going to talk about near-Earth mining, and we're going to kind of connect that a little bit with the California gold rush, but we'll build up to that point here pretty soon, but I just want to introduce Denisa right now. And Denisa, could tell our audience a little bit about yourself, your background, and NusPrime Endeavors.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. NusPrime Endeavors is a small, woman-owned small business. I'm really focusing on the challenges that people are facing getting into the new space industry, especially in security, physical security, especially with the challenges of space and counter space issues, and the things that private industry is going to have to deal with. Getting into the new space, pardon the pun, spacefaring nations have been working in the environment for a long time. There's a lot of political and diplomatic wrangling around the issues involved, the various rights and resources. But there's nothing on or off planet that says that private industry can't get into the game too. And in fact, the whole point of the government subsidizing space technologies for so many decades is to get technologies to the point where private industry can get in and the technology is viable enough to become a self-supporting industry that is economically viable for private industry.
So I guess one of the questions is, how close are we? And before we even get to that point, for a novice like me, what exactly is new space? I mean, how do we define that? How do we quantify it? Can you fill us in on that?
Well, new space, as people are calling it, is really the unexploited potential of deep space. That's the area outside the orbit of the moon around Earth. There are a lot of near-Earth objects, not just the planets that are in our solar system. We all know of Elon Musk wanting to colonize Mars and that sort of thing, but there's also a lot of near-Earth objects, asteroids, that, for instance, Psyche 16 Psyche is an asteroid that is considered a near-Earth object that several scientific and actually industry surveys have estimated the natural resources, the exploitable natural resources, rare earth minerals, that sort of thing, could be worth as much as $700 quintillion on that one rock alone. Now, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of these rocks just floating around in our solar system, waiting for people to come join the rush. And it's going to be, as you mentioned earlier, much like the gold rush of '49.
What type of natural resources are we talking about on 16 Psyche and other asteroids that are near Earth, near space? What kind of is that total addressable market, or that TAM of asteroids?
Things as familiar as iron, copper, potentially gold and silver, things that are the run-of-the-mill minables, but also the rare earth minerals, the things that go into our electronics, the things that are going into the new technologies driving sustainable electricity generation, our electric and hybrid electric cars, all of the newest technology, the things that are going into the newest shipping technologies, whether it's land or sea vehicles, medical technology, anything that is modern day electronics um, requires these elements. And right now, there's huge competition globally for it. And if we are going to, feed the beast without pretty much destroying the planet, uh, which, there's a lot of people clamoring that we're doing, we're going to need to find alternate sources. And these sources are within our reach. I mean, we're already just, what, 2 nights ago, 2 days ago, or was it three, used a private company to launch the latest crew to the space station. It's here and now. It is commercial. Space is commercial. So if your trucking and logistics companies are eyeing the industry, which they should be because they've already got the technology in the works with the uh, autonomous self-driving cargo trucks, the 18-wheelers, um, you know, they need to get out front. And there's a lot of considerations.
There are. I mean, space is commercial now, certainly. How close are we to actually mining asteroids? I guess going up, attaching a vehicle to an asteroid, or I don't even know how that even works out. But I'm sure it takes a lot of AI, a lot of autonomy, a lot of robotics to do. How close are we to mining something?
Well, there have already been several scientific expeditions that have taken samples successfully. And there are, I know, companies planning on getting there first. Quite frankly, the international law states that no one owns these resources. You can't just sit there and go plant a flag and say, well, this asteroid's mine. But if you go and um, take a big chunk of it, nobody's going to say, well, you can't sell that if you can get it back to Earth. So that's, when you're looking at one rock the size of a, couple of football stadiums, or perhaps a little bit bigger, uh, being worth $700 quintillion, that's enough to make every single person on the planet a billionaire. So there's a lot of incentives to get out there, which means there's going to be a lot of incentives to try to, I don't know, hijack it on the way back.
Yeah, yeah. What we know about markets, certainly markets on Earth, is that when it's a rich, lucrative market, and we're talking quintillions of dollars, it's going to attract many bad actors, fraud, violence. And we're comparing this to the 1849 California gold rush, which saw the same type of behaviors, right?
Well, that's why somebody had to ride shotgun on the stagecoach. That's why.
Wells Fargo.
That's where highwaymen came up from. That's why you have so many old country and western songs and folk songs talking about, who was it? Neil Young talking about my widow, stands by my grave, all about some worthless claim. All of these miners that had their claims jumped, and they ended up dead on the and it was complete chaos. It was total lawlessness. There was no sheriff. You think there's going to be a sheriff in space? You think there's really going to be space cowboys out there coming to the rescue? No.
Certainly not
So
at first, right?
not at first. And the international law, the treaties and protocols that will define what you can and can't do as a private company is really going to depend on who owns the pen. So, any of these trucking executives that really want to get in on the game really need to see who's who in the zoo and what are the treaties, what are the protocols, what are the agreements going in to affect, where are the international standards and protocols bodies that are going to start writing these standards and protocols for interfacing. There was a movie some years ago. I'm probably dating myself, but the catchphrase was, "Well, fly casual," and well, do the authentication codes check out? Well, they're a bit older, but yes. So so how are you going to authenticate, say, a space service vehicle that is coming up to your automated space truck that's carrying cargo that needs to be serviced? How are you going to authenticate that that's actually a benign servicing vehicle and not somebody that's just going to come up, a robot servicing vehicle that's going to come up and grab your vehicle and grab your cargo and make off with it? There's a lot of issues that people are going to need to think about. How do you authenticate? How do you determine when those behaviors are authentic or inauthentic? What do you do? And when you've got such a long lag in your communications between your space vehicle and your command post, you're going to have some autonomy in that vehicle to actually act in one way or another, fight or flight. And it's not going to be, in the old days of, I don't know, Speed Racer, I'm probably dating myself, when you can, when the bad guy's truck could send out spinning razor blades out of his wheels. That's going to be frowned upon probably. So what do you do if you're a space trucking company and your space truck sends out an SOS? How does it behave? How does it get away, evade? There's a lot of issues.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of issues, and it brings up the point, and I think this is with all new industries, all new, going back to the 1849 gold rush, new pioneers, new lands that are opened, is infrastructure. And the importance of setting up the right infrastructure so you can actually go out and do mining and exploit these raw materials. You need this infrastructure, what you're talking about right now.
And not only are you going to need infrastructure, and you're going to need interim bases where you can stop and refuel or check and maintain your vehicles, that sort of thing. But as humans start to colonize these near-Earth objects or get out to Mars, you're also going to have this critical supply line for medical support, for perhaps bringing in the infrastructure that will provide and refresh oxygen, the mechanisms that produce an artificial gravity, the mechanisms that protect those humans from radiation. That's critical because those are human lives. And what happens when that supply chain breaks down? You've got to have a way of assuring that there are that it is robust, that it is survivable, that there are secondary and tertiary mechanisms of relay in case something fails. So you have failovers to make sure, because now you've got human lives on the line. So once you get beyond even just, oh wow, now we're making lots of money by mining rocks in space. Now we're starting to colonize because we are humans and we're explorers and scientists, and that's what we do by nature. Then it becomes even more critical.
It does, and it seems like there's some laws in place, so there's a beginning of that. Where do you think legally space law needs to be headed, because one of you're describing the supply chain. Who's going to take ownership? What nation states are going to, how are they going to divide up territories? I know that they're not supposed to, but politics is politics, and it will probably come to a point where nation states or parties will try to take some form of control.
Well, the original treaties regarding space and the outer space treaties that have been in place, gosh, since the late 60s, international treaties, and I'm not a lawyer, but have been explicit about really no one owning space and no country having the right to set or determine law in space. But, Elon Musk has gone as far as to say, well, there's no law in space and there's nobody to tell me that I can't set the government, create my own government on Mars. So that is a very good question. And as industry executives looking at positioning themselves strategically, not to be the person necessarily doing the mining, but to be the Levi Strauss and providing that service of outfitting and kitting and providing for the logistics and providing for the transportation. There is a huge amount of money and sustainable economy to be made in that space of the new space industry. And that's where you need to look at placing your advocates or building your pack and being able to say, well, how do we as an industry want to be able to protect our vehicles? What is considered a legal, justifiable, and reasonable defense of our personal fleet if a bad actor should try to encroach or intrude or spoof or take control of our uh, our vehicles or intercept or interfere in our routes, because we don't have highways and traffic signals and and state cops and agreements, international agreements with Interpol, etc., to chase down and stop the um, bad guys who have hijacked our cargo and fled across the border to Mexico with it. It doesn't work that way in space.
And I guess these will become even bigger issues. Let's talk a little bit to wrap up the conversation here about colonization and kind of the supply chain with that is kind of going off of what you're talking about right now, but at a larger scale.
Well, at a larger scale, I mean, there have been endless movies that have uh, addressed this, and you can look at all um, those the most recent ones that were very, very um, uh, imaginative in their creativity, but it has always been the contractors, the companies have been the ones. The government is not the one that gets out there and establishes these routes and the interfaces. It's private industry that leads the way in the future now that the technology is there and private companies are actually able to survive and thrive um, by doing business in space. They are really going to be the ones who are going to have to get together, organize, and come to an alignment about what are the corridors, how do we define these corridors, how do we define the handshakes that we make at these certain points. There are things called Lagrange points that are essentially really good spots to set up in-space truck stops, because they're very efficient and convenient. Those are all things that we're going to have to think about, because those are the jumping off points to get even further and further and further. And it's a very exciting time right now.
It is very exciting. It's very complicated. Thank you very much for your time today, Denisa. How does our audience reach out and learn more about yourself and NusPrime endeavors?
Well, I have my website is NusPrime.com. My email is Denisa@NusPrime, NusPrime.com, and I'm on LinkedIn. So I'm pretty easy to find.
Great. Thank you very much for your time again.
Thank you.